Ladies and gentlemen, it's that time again. From the deepest jungles to the outmost reaches of space and beyond the veils of death itself, the Bald and Bonkers boys are back for another episode. It's no secret that you won't know what will happen next, but Dakota Frandsen and Chris Moll promise that all bets are off. Viewer discretion and straitjackets advised. These two idiots live up to the name.
Pitch microphone.
There. See, what the fuck is going on? Jesus Christ. Ugh. Like 10 minutes before the show started, my computer just shut down. I had the blue screen of death on my end. Sorry about that. How the hell is everybody? How is everyone? Do you hear me now? Do you hear me now? Do you hear me now? Bald and silent. I think I fixed it. And man, this is why I'm the bonkers of Bald and Bonkers. Anyway, jeez, I don't know why they're fucking with me today. Jesus. But it's been kind of an eventful week. How is everybody going on? How is everybody in the States doing after the emergency alert test? The regularly scheduled 2 to 3 year test of the emergency alert system so they can warn everybody that shit is going to go down. Not that there's an apocalyptic event, just that shit is going down. How's everybody? Any zombies? No. Maybe. You're either a parent, a fentanyl user, or a social media influencer. Oh. Well, I don't know. It was kind of weird. It was like, for some of you may know this, but for those of you who don't, there was another incident, UFO-wise, near me, not this week. It started out at about 8:23 p.m. I was just going to work, not expecting to do much. Then all of a sudden I notice there is a small kind of orangish light that is hauling ass through the sky. I did the usual checks. No mappable satellites, no flight records. And it was pulling off some pretty impressive maneuvers. No real sound to discern. I checked all resources. No flights should have been in the air that are mappable. Naturally, this does not always include military flights. I managed to get some video of it. Yeah, I posted it up on one of my other channels. And by all accounts, it seems I genuinely caught something. Exactly what? I don't know. But it seemed like it was hauling ass. 4 hours later, I'm about halfway through my work schedule. One of my contacts in local law enforcement actually sends me a message saying that there's an officer who is reporting a series of strange lights in mountains just south of me. A lot of you who watch this show probably aren't from the area, so I'll explain the situation a bit. Obviously, I'm in the south, just at the base of the Sawtooth. Runs right through here. There's smaller area of mountains that is part of the sawtooths that my family and I always like to go up. Locally, they're known as the South Hills. Now, in regards to this UFO incident, several videos and eyewitness accounts point that it does look like it was military running drills. Here's the interesting bit. Where they were flying those planes was where the craft I filmed was hauling ass from. Now, I actually been kind of monitoring cases in my area, and for 30 something plus years, pretty much since the Roswell incident, and a majority of the local UFO sightings seem to somehow be related to the South Hills. This includes, now, this could very well just be a well-timed coincidence, but this could very well include the incident where I was about 6 years old and was abducted and later found inside my grandparents' house with no memory of how the hell I got there. My grandparents' house is practically at the base of the mountain. It's about a 20-minute drive from the main roadway, from my grandparents' house to the main roadway to go up the mountain. There's a couple of camping areas. There's a popular ski area that's up there. And I also know from my investigations that there is a small Sasquatch population up there. They mostly keep to themselves. There's only one incident I've ever heard of where a Sasquatch potentially went on the attack. Granted, it was after it was struck by a car, so understandably so, I'd be a little ticked off too. But that's my current update. It does look like a majority of the strange lights that the officer saw were probably military based, but honestly, which Air Force base near you, Dakota? It is Mountain Home Air Force Base is the main one. I was told that the flight squadron, I believe it's the 366th, was doing maneuvers. There's also several private airstrips, and all around me, they do flight trainings. There's possibly, honestly, I'm starting to wonder if there may be something hidden in those mountains. Because, like I said, I can personally validate that there's a Sasquatch population there, and several craft have been seen there. It should also be worth noting that the South Hills are just barely above the Idaho-Nevada border. And the federal offices down in Nevada and Idaho, they coordinate all the time. I actually know of one incident where it was an FBI office in Salt Lake that brought attention to authorities here in Idaho about a possible school shooting threat. And I will say that they managed to have boots kicking down doors within the hour before the school started, so no harm was done. There is a lot of activity around me, though, Dots. You can actually look this up. It's the Twin Falls saucer hoax incident. It was like within the week of Roswell, where it looked like a small UFO that was claimed to be made of like plexiglass, and it was written off as teenagers goofing around. But right around after this incident was deemed a hoax, media coverage for all the sightings that were going on here in Idaho as well as everywhere else pretty much died off. And that includes the Kenneth Arnold incident as well. It's something I went into a few shows back, but I don't know. Main reason why I know about this stuff is because, well, I got a lot of contacts in the area, and I put out a favor saying that if you hear of anything weird, call me. And I'm cashing in good on that favor. But still, it honestly goes to make you wonder. Why? Now, it's not uncommon for training runs to be done at this time of year. Do it right as the weather's still somewhat nice. But it is unusual. I will mark this. Maybe this is why they tried to shut down my computer earlier, like 10 minutes before the broadcast. They are rolling out fancier planes. You might remember about a month, almost 2 months back, there was another mass sighting that I talked about here on the air that involved a massive triangle-shaped craft that looked like it was intercepted by jets. And while part of me wants to dismiss this next part as my own eyes playing tricks on me in the night, I've also noticed possible stealth tech. And I'll just leave it at this. Basically, on a clear night, there would be things flying above what looked like something blocking the stars for like a brief second, and the light around the light of the star would actually bend. If you ever pointed like a laser pointer where like in a clear glass of water and it bends like that, it was very similar to that function. Kiwani, let's just reading the chat here from Robin, who lives in the same state as Dakota. His lifelong contact with Sasquatch. I read he's actually in Washington. I'm in Idaho, but it is close enough. I'm right on the border, but nevertheless, I'm starting to get more and more convinced of the Sasquatch ET connection, but exactly how deep that goes, I don't know. I feel like there's some. I honestly feel like there's some sort of like PTSD level flashbacks getting ready to brew for me here very soon for how much is kicking up. Could that be a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. Let's see. Based on the stuff I remember so far, it's a mess. So that's just kind of an update on what I have there so far. It's definitely interesting to see how it goes. Now tonight's topic actually comes from a guest email who wanted to ask me a few questions in regards to some of the stuff we talked about, as well as the show and all that stuff. So I'm actually going to bring it up here. I kept their name out. Is it showing? Come on. There we go. Now I can see it. So yeah, interesting connection. Sasquatch and ETs. I had not considered that before. I was hesitant to, because honestly, a lot of the people who tried to use this alleged theory seem like they were trying to make up excuses as to why one has not been caught. Personally, in my experience, especially the young ones seem to be darker in color. And the one I encountered, it was definitely a juvenile. It was almost midnight when I spotted it. It saw me setting up a bait trap. I wasn't looking to hurt the thing. I was hoping to try to catch a foot casting. But it saw me setting up its watch and it started to come out. I jumped because, I realized, ooh, baby Bigfoot. And that thing just took off. It was the middle of the night. It was mostly dark. It had mostly dark fur. There was no way I was going to keep up with that thing. And I didn't have any sophisticated, thermal equipment to monitor its location. Anyway, going back to what I was saying. So this person wrote into the show, said, "Hey guys, love the show. I always try to catch the lives on weekends, but usually listen through Audible on my way to work. My family and I love that you take a humorous approach and try to make everyone feel welcome. Something that I honestly wish more people would implement into their shows and communities. Yeah, it would be nice to see more, people getting along and working together than the drama that stirs up. But one step at a time, right? They go on to say, I wanted to ask Dakota a couple of questions, if that's all right. If not, I understand. I don't mean any trouble. Question number one is, do you have ADHD? I sometimes notice it can be hard for you to stay on track when you and Chris go into your banter, and you seem to be kind of irritated by it. I get that the show is called Bald and Bonkers, but there's quite a bit that you guys talk about that can be complex and hard for people to understand, and the joking around can be a bit much. Well, let's address this. I have never been formally diagnosed, but DNA tests that some of my relatives have taken, ones that I know for sure are directly related to me, have shown that apparently in my bloodline, we do have the genes for ADHD-like behaviors to manifest. And honestly, it would explain how I can see kind of flighting and be able to take on so much at once. Have I been formally diagnosed? No. Do I want to be dealing with a bunch of pills that alter my personality? Hell no. One of my sisters was put on ADHD pills because her teacher didn't want to, deal with, a kid not paying attention. She also probably didn't take into consideration that my sister was apparently blind, so she wasn't paying attention in class because she couldn't fucking see. But I digress. So, formal diagnosis, no, but strong possibility. Question number 2 is, have you written any books about your experiences? I know about Dear Coda and how you started to address the ET situation you deal with, but it seems like you learned a bunch more that you have a hard time expressing or fitting into a show. All right. I've had quite a few people ask me about this. I will say, yes, there is a book coming together. And yes, there's certain aspects about this. If you've caught pretty much any of my shows or any of the interviews I've done, I've touched into it a bit that certain things started to manifest out of some really negative events that I wouldn't wish on anybody. So getting to talk about some of these things, and as well as talking about some of the things I remember, it's hard. And for me, I've developed this kind of practice. I've noticed that if someone goes to reach out saying, they have a situation, they think I might be able to help them, in order to establish trust with that person, I start to reveal details that I haven't really shared before, trying to bring us on the same level. Because obviously, you go to someone, asking for help on something, it's going to make you feel better knowing that they know what the hell they're doing, right? They know, the frustration and all that. That's the logic of it. Unfortunately, being that I've started to become more and more public about certain things, it has brought on a lot of stress and unnecessary attacks. But I don't want to claim that, 3-letter agencies, because I do have some strong ties. I'll get to that in a sec, Robin. I do have some strong ties with CIA, NSA, nothing in official capacity. I just happen to have a friend to a friend type situation. And if there's something that comes to my attention that I want to ask them, they're usually pretty honest. And they've even explained that when it comes to their lifetime secrecy acts, their non-disclosure agreements they have to sign when they get into these positions, they are able to talk about the things they've dealt with. It's just that exactly how and names of people involved are have to be omitted. It's pretty much the same as when I go to talk, reach out to one of my relatives in law enforcement because, let's say, one example that we had to, say, just as one example, there was a really, really, really harsh blizzard that was hitting the area. I mean, for me, driving home wasn't too bad because the routes I drive usually are major truck roads, so they're the first ones plowed. There's this one as I'm driving along, I'm already stressed out because I feel my ass end wiggling. I don't want to end up in a crash in the middle of a blizzard. That'd just be awful. But I see this car pull out in front of me. I was driving up past a high school. This car goes to pull out, spins in front of me, ends up in the middle of a field. Conditions are slick. You're hardly able to see a thing. The only reason I was able to tell it was a car is the fact that I saw the disco lights from it spinning. Now, I wanted to stop, make sure the guy was okay, but I felt that because of how bad the road was, if I stopped, I was only going to be putting myself in problems' way. So naturally, once I had got home, got safe, and calmed down, I reached out to my contacts, said, "Hey, there was a crash here about this time. I wanted to stop, but felt like if I did, I'd get myself into a crash. Is the guy okay?" They mentioned, "Yeah, I know what you're talking about. He's okay. He needed a change of pants, but he's okay." All right. Now I'm just reading the comments here. Most of the NSA and military are white hats. It's other feds you got to be careful of. NSA and CIA are behind a lot of the major corrupt operations that follow through. FBI, they've tried to crack down on it, but it's usually NSA or CIA that shuts them down. And a lot of the federal investigations is because I had to get involved due to some rather gruesome things that were going on, as well as some things that were targeting my family. So I ended up building trust, and I also know that a lot of them like to watch these kinds of shows, and that's how they found out about me. So, hi guys. Anyway, moving on. This kind of goes into Robin's earlier question: have I had any recent contact with my awful family? So the person that wrote in, they asked, how exactly does the situation with your ET kids work? Was it a natural conception? Were they grown in a lab? What's going on there? I'm genuinely curious about this one the most. Robin, the context with my otherworldly family, it's pretty much like every other day now. There's been a couple times where I know Dots has joked about this, where some of the UFOs flying over my house are probably my kids going on joyrides, and let's just say he's not far off. Don't spit your tea, Dots. And the reason why that contact is so soon as the 3-letter organizations are mentioned. Figures, huh? You don't like it when I talk about you? Mm-hmm. Like an obsessive ex. Anyway, the contact is like almost like every other day. But the thing is, they're not just sitting up there waiting for me to become available to take on job. They have their own jobs to do. The reason why, I mean, technically speaking, I'm not actually supposed to know about them. But it became a situation where they knew that the only thing that was going to help save my life is that if I knew about them, because they knew that the second I knew a kid was in trouble, that's when the worst fighter comes out of me, and especially if it's going to be my own kid. But again, that's probably why a lot of people are asking about the book. Yes, it's being written. I'm going with the title, I Know You Won't Believe Me. It's going to take the perspective of me going through life and trying to figure all this out. I figured that would be the most effective way to tell the story. And again, there's a lot there that doesn't happen. As far as whether or not they were grown in a lab, because I know there's some people who heard about my abduction story and automatically assume I was taken by Grace for crossbreeding. We're actually going to go into that for tonight. But when it comes to my kids, I will say this. I know that at least the youngest was the result of mommy and daddy putting the bun in the oven. As for the other two, I'm still not clear on how that one works. Part of it sounds like they were around before I came down. Others not so much. The fact that time travel has apparently been a part of this makes this very confusing. Now, as far as how it actually works, in our case, being that, okay, this obviously involves quite a bit of backtracking. So we're just going to shut this down. When it comes to hybridization, it's not that out there when you really think about it. I mean, we see it all the time in nature. We have the polar grizz. There's a number of different factors that go into it. I mean, the beginning of human civilization, whether or not you believe in Anunnaki interference, seems to be about coexisting timelines. Oh, yeah! Even more so if brave kids traveling back in time to kick you in the ass and have a joyride in the ship. But here's the thing, Dots. It's shit like that that confirms they're my kids, because I probably do the same damn thing. Anyway, when it comes to how my kids were conceived, my wife, I believe her name is Avina. The thing is, I gotta clarify, when my contact situations have happened, it's almost like as I'm being brought back, the situation's being severely dumbed down. So in case there's something I need to remember, I know I'll be able to recite it easily in a way that, people who are lucky enough not to be utterly confused by seeing this shit firsthand would be able to understand. Hybridization is, it's a lot more common than people think, and we're actually seeing it in our world under natural circumstances today due to climate change. Yes, climate change is real. The planet goes on its own cycles. I mean, you have the polar grizz, which was the result of polar bears moving towards major land surfaces and grizzly bears and polar bears having overlapping mating seasons. When it comes to my kids, if there was any outside treatment that needed to be done, it would be mostly for medical reasons, to eliminate any potential illness. That's always going to be a risk when it comes to crossbreeding different species. In our case, the situation is not as high risk because my wife is technically human. Just enough of our DNA matches up to where viable children can be reproduced. I actually know of this one incident when I was up there, where I was being called in on a medical emergency because there was these two pregnant women who were having some sort of complications. And me and this other guy, I'm not exactly sure his name, but he was humanoid, taller than I am. If anything, the vibe I got off this guy was similar to Shaquille O'Neal. But anyway, we were both medical officers. We got called in because these women were having complications. They were bleeding. There was genuine fears of losing the baby. When we started to run examinations to find out exactly what was wrong, these were hybrid children. I believe, if I remember correctly, we were able to sequence the DNA of the child and actually get a very vivid picture of what the father looks like. He looked like he was he would basically be what you would describe as a type of reptilian, which it didn't seem like this pregnancy was put together under false pretenses. It wasn't, some abduction and hybridization effort. It seemed consensual. But we monitored it closely. The second we were able to identify the father's genome, we got the bleeding to stop. Then we administered a stabilization agent. This is how it was explained to me. I remember seeing the woman in the pods, and there was a substance that was going into them. And almost immediately, their condition improved. The babies were okay, and we sent them on the way. Whether or not I'm remembering this correctly, I'm not 100% sure, but I do know it does check out. Because more often, when there's several reports of these alleged abductions and hybridizations and there's even been one case where I dealt with where down here, the woman was physically showing signs that she was pregnant, then all of a sudden, it's just like the baby vanished. In that case, it was probably a gray. Just lost my track of thought there. See, ADHD! But our DNA is compatible with many alien races, universal almost. Yes, but there's always still that risk. There's a number of complications that can actually come up. In fact, one of the experiments that we know down here involves basically what they're trying to do down here is try to see what animals can be used to artificially grow human-like organs for the purpose of potential transplanting. I mean, you hear about pigs being injected with human DNA, so a form of chimerism, right? Sometimes there's complications with the babies, and the babies had to be removed and monitored medically in order for them to come to full term. That's the thing. They can take just fine. If everything settles correctly, they can become viable as adults, meaning that they can have their own offspring. There's still several levels of complications, and their medical technology is sophisticated enough to where it's just a matter of finding out who's mommy, who's daddy, then bridging the gap. The way I understood it at the time was similar to RH incompatibility, where say like father's A plus, mother's B negative. The mother has to go through a series of shots in order to make sure that her immune system doesn't attack the baby, recognizing it as a foreign substance. It's under that same premise. Some of the experimentation when it comes to hybridization down here, they're looking to part of the process they're actually looking into is to seeing what animal's sperm functions the same. And one of the several of the embryos that actually took and started to grow, the embryos were terminated before they could reach full term. So allegedly, none of these animals have got out and are running about. These animals were like a deer sheep hybrid and a few others. Another one that I thought was kind of interesting was a hybrid between a cow and a dolphin. Now, when it comes to the egg cell, there's almost like a gelatin-like layer that basically acts as a filter for what types of sperm gets in. If any foreign sperm gets introduced, it helps keep it out. But they've also found that for some reason, certain animals that you would not be compatible under natural circumstances can get through. And they think it's because there is just enough of a genetic similarity. Damn, fucking allergies. I mean, right now, like I said before, whether or not you believe in the ET interference of early human evolution, mainstream science believes that modern humans are essentially hybrids of 5 different humanoid races that had pre-existed. Homo sapiens sapiens was just the one that was deemed the most fit. A lot of archaeological records state that the most likely reason for this is that the modern man, as we see it now, was more likely to come together in times of crisis. And that's why they also say, what's the first sign of civilization? When you see a healed, broken bone. That means that someone physically took care of this individual who sustained that injury until the bone was healed. That would be the first sign of civilization. Now, with ET interference, our DNA becoming compatible, as Dot says, we're not exactly a universal donor. That's why O negative blood was believed to be introduced to help us reach that, but there is still some complications. But their understanding of DNA and how it works is so extensive that it's almost like going into a doctor for a common cold. It's almost that easy to fix. And it gets to be real fascinating when you think about it. Some contactees even report specimens, ETs out there with green skin. And it was explained to them that the environments these beings were going to be introduced, because there is part of the hybridization DNA programs out there, is their main concern is to make sure whoever they go to plant on that planet is able to survive. And for whatever reasons out there, wherever that particular being, the examples they would give, they would look like Gamora from Guardians of the Galaxy. They would be humanoid, but they would have plant skin. They would have green skin because of chlorophyll in their bloodstream. They made it to where they didn't necessarily have to eat anything. They can just survive on light. Again, obviously, with the average understanding of DNA down here, that type of process to create a viable offspring from that, because again, there's several animals you can crossbreed and they can produce offspring, but they're not exactly viable. They can't have kids of their own. That's where a lot of the struggle comes in. And also, when you take into consideration the organ transplant processes, being that the memories, talents, and personality of the donor can sometimes somehow be transferred over to the to the recipient in those cases, if that organ is coming from a pig, what's going to do that to that person? They going to sniff for truffles? But also the same as in reverse, that they're also trying to avoid essentially a Planet of the Apes scenario down here, where where the animals who become part of this program they're tested on, they don't start to develop human levels of consciousness or intellect. They don't become aware of what's going on around them. They just know that they're being hurt. They don't know why. They don't know how. Makes you wonder what would happen if they tried that shit with an octopus. But again, part of the issue when it comes to these experiments is gathering the samples on an ethical level, which is a lot of the issue that comes up with these types of experimentations in dealing with just about anything supernatural. The ethical implications. If we were able to go in and grab these things just fine, that's one thing. But you may as well be torturing several people, putting them under surgery, and the word gets out about the things you're doing, it's going to backfire tremendously. Which also raises the question, what the hell happened to allow the ETs to have such an extensive knowledge? Is it going to be like down here where they learned because something fucked up? Maybe. In talking about this type of subject, it also makes you wonder how the term GMO transfers among our star friends. Genetically modified organisms. Just about any fruit or vegetable you buy in the store, anything that is brought up from farms nowadays, could very well be a hybrid. Look about 50, 70 years ago, several of these fruits and vegetables either didn't exist or look very different. But that's also because inbreeding is a major function. We're artificially isolating certain traits. And that's where a lot of several different issues can come about. Just look at dog breeders and how many issues, purebred dogs have. Like Dodd says, we are the GMOs. Precisely. Now, it could very well be a situation where it's gotten so extensively, they're so used to it that the ethical dilemmas behind it are no longer a concern. They just know that something has to be done. And there's several extensive surgeries that can be implemented. But this also comes into the realm of like the film Gattaca. Where do we draw the line? Understandable. If you're going to be inhabiting a planet, you're going to want the people there and the future generations that are going to be calling that planet home to be able to survive. Preferably without needing too much technical interference. They don't need to, put on a spacesuit just to go on a Sunday stroll. Or whatever they call it. It is a fascinating topic. Exactly. And if you are to take the ET theories behind it, we are the hybrid of at least, I think it's up to 23, isn't it? 23 different races tossed in their DNA to create modern humans. Which also brings up another thing. Another issue when it comes to hybridization is that certain gene combinations are guaranteed to be lethal. So if we have 23, 24 races in total messing around with our DNA, not everybody's going to have the same, concentrations. Some people may have a little bit more reptile. Some may have a little bit more this. Some people may have, octopus DNA. I don't know. Who the hell knows? I know what Elena says. I follow her pretty close, and she's one of the few exceptions, I would say, when it comes to some of the things she talks about. Naturally, I say you should always, no matter who it is, present yourself with a level of skepticism, even me. Be skeptical about the information that comes out, but Elena, I know for a fact, has a decent enough track record where she deserves to at least be heard. Whether or not you take up her information, that's your call at the end of the day. Just like right here. I mean, how does knowing about hybridization play into your day-to-day? There's another factor when it comes to people who are being abducted. Focus, damn you! Talking to my camera. Fuck, I just had a marker. Ah, there it is. There's also something else when it comes to the women in particular that get abducted for these hybridization experiments. Did you know pregnant ladies can technically be considered chimeras? It's a little bit more expressed if they gave birth to a boy. But yeah, technically pregnant women can be considered chimeras because of what happens during pregnancy. I should probably grab a sock or something. No. Okay. Now, I hope my sister isn't watching this show because she is about 7 months pregnant. Elena's intel has been spot on so far. Yeah, I know. She's the main reason I figured out how much I know about my situation. Let's say you got a little bundle of joy. It is well known that when a woman is pregnant, the baby will send stem cells out to the rest of the body in order to help repair the damage. That means the baby's also sending out part of its own DNA. That DNA can actually implant part itself in the placenta, and the mother can carry it on for future generations. So what does that mean? So say a woman gets abducted, implanted with, let's say a gray, as an example. That means that while the gray child is still in there, part of that gray's DNA is getting sent out to the mother. Now, the mother's already having to be monitored just to make sure that the pregnancy doesn't naturally terminate itself. When they go to take the child, that's what they're going to make it look like. But again, they have to be monitored to make sure that the compatibility doesn't affect the child's health. Now, with some of the more malevolent grays out there, they're not going to give two shits. If it fails, they're just going to move. They're just going to try again and move on to someone else. It could very well be. And with the forces of light, for lack of a better word, same function applies. Isn't a chimera, as known here, a baby with both sexes present? No, that is a hermaphrodite. Or, what was it? It depends on the genetic level, but there's also a genetic condition known as, I believe it's Klinefelter syndrome, where a person can physically have two X chromosomes and a Y. And they can have both traits of both sexes present. These people are legitimately, a lot of people got, not too long ago, there was actually, I believe it was a knight that was found. They ran DNA tests and saw that it actually had this condition. It is genetic, and Chris, no, I don't have it, as far as I know. The chimera comes from, I believe, Greek mythology, and it's essentially an animal that's an amalgamation of several different animals put together. In medical terms, chimerism happens a lot with people who were supposed to be twins. One sec outward, another inward. No, with chimerism, in medical terms, it's most common in people who are supposed to be twins, where one twin gets absorbed into another. The family may actually not know. A lot of what brings awareness to if someone has this condition, it doesn't present any, major defects or anything like that. If it was a twin, it's going to be compatible, right? It's going to be those cases where if, say, a father goes in for a DNA test, his wife, he's been loyal to his wife has been loyal to him. They didn't date anybody else since they were together, didn't sleep with anybody else. There's no insinuations that the wife was sexually assaulted by, some drunk guy at an alley somewhere. So, yeah, something like that. In mythological terms. But anyway, that's what I'm saying. And with these situations, the parents get to go DNA tested. Either the mother or the father doesn't match the child's DNA. There's been several cases where children have almost been taken from their biological parents because of this, only for them to find out later on that different parts of the body had different DNA. Say, like, the father, say it's the father who's the chimera, his entire body could show his DNA, but he could technically have another man's testicles. He could have his own brother's testicles because that's where the other twin got absorbed. That's what I'm saying. And when it comes to what I was talking about with the pregnancy thing, it's like, again, the baby will send out parts of its own DNA, stem cells, to patch up the mother's, any injuries the mother may have had. That DNA does not disappear. It can carry on, and it could very well carry on with any future siblings that come about. So say a woman gets implanted with a gray child, something happens during the pregnancy that, DNA gets sent out to the mother from the baby itself. They're not being abducted and modeled. They are most likely, but the baby itself sends the DNA out. It basically implants itself in the mother. The mother goes on to have more kids. Chances are, albeit small samples, of the gray DNA is going to be passed on to the children. Think about that for a sec. The Greys never really had to do mass abductions. We've known that to be a bullshit lie from the start. They just needed to know who was likely to have children and who was likely to have the least amount of pregnancy issues when implanted with the child, and who was more likely to spread on. So that way, the gray DNA becomes a part of ours through natural selection. It's devious, but pretty genius when you think about it. Now, when it comes to the starseed / envoy program, obviously the mother especially, the father sometimes as well. But the mother has to be prepped in order to carry the envoy child. It's a matter of saving balance. So if that child legitimately has extraterrestrial DNA in it, it's helping balance it out. It's integration, yes. This is why I've always said, do not be afraid to be skeptical of anybody, even if someone has an impressive track record. There's chances are they're still human. They might slip up from time to time. It happens. They're human. It's not an excuse to judge them any more or less, unless they have turned so far they are willingly hurting people. I say that's the only fair exception. But everything that we talk about when it comes to the ET phenomenon, the basics, the very bare basics, are already in the general population accessible. Damn near everything can be validated in ways that some of the biggest names out there may have not even thought of themselves. At the end of the day, that's why this integration, this connection, this networking that we do, working together, creating platforms where we can freely talk about this type of stuff, exchange information. That's why it becomes so important. Because yes, it can happen through pregnancy, but every single bit of stimulus that you receive throughout the day can affect your mind. It does affect your mind. It alters every single pathway. Coming together can cause great movement. We also need to make sure we're coming together under the best of terms. Otherwise, some complete abominations may come about. Yeah. When looking for ET, the search starts with you. And as I've come to learn, that takes on more than one meaning. I was not expecting looking for UFOs to turn into a therapy session. But here we are. We're getting back to the end of the show. I do hope you enjoy. Chris said he's going to be back tomorrow, so back to the usual BS. I figure we're going to go into a topic that we haven't really touched on before, and that is allegations of the deep state implanting their plans into mainstream media. Let's go into it. It's a topic we haven't really done on the show, and as more and more is coming to light, it may be a bit interesting to re-examine things that have been overlooked. Probably going to be a lot of Simpsons references, but for how long that show's been on, it's only to be expected. And let's see. I want to say something else. Yes. Next week is actually the second anniversary of the Bald and Bonkers show. Yes, Chris and I have been doing this for about 2 years straight. Somehow we haven't, killed each other yet. We've come close, but we haven't. Though I do imagine, for those of you who caught last week's episode, if you're interested in some, fun merch, we have something brand new in our stores, available to you to purchase. I imagine it will be quite entertaining. Dots, remember, swallow, don't spit. Your tea. Your tea! Oh, God. Introducing our new merch design. Yeah. And for those of you on the podcast side, you really should come to a video show from time. You can see this beautiful little alligator with the lipstick in the Scottish flag colors, holding up a sign that says, "Want to clap me." Chris, you can get me back tomorrow, buddy. Much love. Stay safe. Stay sane. That's going to be very hard to do with everything that's coming up.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today, ladies and gentlemen. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe anywhere you see Bald and Bonkers for even more insanity. Be sure to spread the love to the Bald and Bonkers boys' other endeavors. And a special thank you to our audience, guests, and everyone else who helps make this crazy ride happen. Amazing things are ahead. Learn more by visiting www.baldandbonkers.net. See you next time. Much love and take care.